Hello, welcome back to Crushing Sounds. My name is Chris. Thanks for clicking on this video. Just a quick bit at the beginning. So I made this video back when Vended released this album back at the end of September and early October. I did the bulk of it then. However, life got in the way, I didn't get around to finishing it, and the album then passed by its relevancy, so I kind of dropped it. However, I did the bulk of the work, and I was thinking recently, I actually think it's quite a good video, if I do say so myself, so I figured, why not finish it? I'm not expecting it to do well, as I say, it's long past its relevancy. However, if you do enjoy it, thank you so much for sticking through and checking it out. New videos coming soon, of course, so hope you enjoy this look at the debut album by Vended. It's a question that's been asked ever since music, or really any art form, became an industry that involved making money. Is music a meritocracy? Is it the most talented, most loved by the consumer that rises to the top? Or is it people with an advantage, or connections, or money, or whatever else?
Well, yes, sometimes is the answer to that.
I can only speak for the metal side of music, but from my observation is that while some acts do get a head start when climbing that industry ladder, for the most part you can see the journey that bands and artists go through right from the underground of their local scene all the way to festival headliners. Sure, the biggest bands have to get lucky and get noticed by a record label to really push them into the big leagues, but for the most part you do have to have some level of talent and promise to get the attention of these labels in the first place. It's all well and good being marketable, you also have to be able to, actually play well and make music that people will like. Being given a leg up by corporate bigwigs is more seen as an inevitable step in a band growing even bigger. It's somewhat cynical, but it's part of how all this works. A good example of this, of course, is Slipknot. One of the most successful metal bands of the 21st century, Slipknot began as humbly as any other. With big ideas in Des Moines, Iowa, the group went through various lineup changes as they honed their sound to what they felt they needed to attract major labels. The band self-financed Mate, Feed, Kill, Repeat themselves, which is estimated to have cost them around $40,000. Though I could only find that statistic in the book Slipknot Inside the Sickness Behind the Masks by Jason Arnopp, and nowhere else, so who knows if it's actually correct. Either way, the band clearly put a lot of work and their own money into their early days. After recruiting Corey Taylor to add some melody to their music, they finally managed to grab the attention of labels and were offered a $500,000 contract for 7 albums. I'm not going to go into the reasons as to why that is a horrifyingly bad deal. There are many articles detailing that horrendous record deal that Slipknot ended up taking. My point here being that the biggest heavy metal band on the planet didn't just walk into the success that they have now. They had to hone their sound, be persistent, and slog through a horrendous record deal that they've only recently been able to get out of. So why am I going on about Slipknot? Because it's the perfect segue into today's main band. One of the biggest metal bands in the world, got their start at grassroots level, like everyone else. So now let's talk about Vended. Vended, and yes, it is pronounced with emphasis on the dead, I had to check that several times because it just sounds so weird, is a new metal band from Des Moines, Iowa, formed in 2018 and beginning to release singles from 2021. The band have just dropped their long-awaited debut album in September of this year. God, I'm a few weeks late to this one. I really need to find out how to streamline this process. The band was formed by vocalist Griffin Taylor and drummer Simon Cran, and this is where the discussion of nepotism comes in. Griffin and Simon are sons of 2 members of Slipknot, Corey Taylor and Sean Cran, sons of members of one of the most successful metal bands in history. For a scene as passionate about its underground as heavy metal, it's easy to see why this can be seen to a lot of people as ever so slightly cynical. People love to see bands rise through the genre after hard work and perseverance. Vended have had to deal with accusations of their success being handed to them pretty much since day one. But is that really fair? Shouldn't we be judging them on their own merit? So let's do just that. Let's check out the debut album from Vended. Vended's music is inspired by that turn-of-the-century nu metal, less interested in the hip-hop aspect of the genre, and instead throwing everything into the heavy-as-fuck riffs and twisted attitude. Sound familiar? So yeah, let's get the most blindingly obvious thing out of the way right now. The music, most specifically the riffing, is very reminiscent of Slipknot. The thudding open notes that alternate with one power chord is very reminiscent of tracks like Surfacing or The Negative One. Even the tremolo sections in The Far Side sound lifted from the first two Slipknot albums. Not just the chugging though, the slightly dissonant higher up notes that add a twisted inflection to the music is also very not inspired. And the track Where the Honesty Lies feels ripped straight from Slipknot's album Iowa. Really, your enjoyment of this album is going to hinge on whether you're prepared to accept the fact that this sounds exactly like something that you have heard before. For me personally, I did find myself getting sucked in. I've got to say, when that spooky noise intro thing was ramping up and then launched into the riffing of Paint the Skin, I did have a sense of nostalgia wash over me. I'm sure anyone who was a teenager at any point within the 2000s remembers when everything had to be edgy and hardcore. Not hardcore as in hardcore, but hardcore, you know. As an adult, this can often look and sound cheesy in retrospect, but it was interesting being reminded of that time in my youth where if an album didn't start with some spooky, twisted intro, then I wasn't going to be interested. I'm sure the band really, really don't want people to compare their music to Slipknot, but man, is it hard not to. This music is so clearly inspired by Slipknot's very immediate, recognizable sound. Now, just to reiterate what I've said earlier, I don't particularly care that this sounds a lot like another band, even if it is Slipknot. I just care about whether I enjoy it or not. Is it a little derivative? Absolutely. But I don't need every band I listen to be wholly original. I love those first two Slipknot albums, and this album gives me vibes from those albums, which I genuinely don't think I've heard any band manage to get close to doing. That being said though, when the album wants to go heavy, it goes really damn heavy. Vended's approach isn't to be overly flashy or anything like that, it's just the musical equivalent of being pissed off. It's simple, yet still effective. I'd probably like the track Serenity the most, just because it has the most dynamics going on, a strong verse, and simple yet pure riffing. This extends really to the album as a whole. It's a very straight and to the point package. Not a lot of the songs deviate from one another, and all more or less go through the same motions, so the album does have the potential to feel a little bit repetitive on subsequent listens. However, since none of the songs are especially long, the longest being just under 5 minutes, it never goes on long enough for the familiarity to really become that big of an issue. The one aspect of the sound though that people seem to be obsessing over the most is how much Griffin's vocals sound a lot like Corey's. Because of course they do. What did you expect? There are plenty of inflections here where he sounds like Corey. I mean, the brooding spoken word thing is kind of Corey Taylor's trademark. That was always going to sound familiar. But his gutturals, on the other hand, dare I say he goes way lower than Corey has ever done. His cleans seem to flip-flop between sounding exactly like Corey and other times where he really doesn't. It's close, I'll grant you, but you can tell it's Griffin. Obviously I'm not going to hold against them that Griffin sounds a lot like his dad, because no shit, of course he does. He may have the Taylor genes, but Griffin certainly has his own vocal chops. I would even go as far as to say he is a really good vocalist. He has his own voice, and he owns it. So with all those comparisons to the band that should not be named, is Vended's music actually good? I'm gonna go with yes. It may struggle in the originality department, but this is performed with full commitment, full of anger, produced very well, so those heavy bits hit harder, and it's got its catchy hooks. And it's only about 37 minutes long. Perfect length. My only real, not problem with the album, just something that confuses me, are the interludes. We get 2, and they are just dropped in with no real thought. We get Going Up at track 5, and Ones at track 11. They're fine, but they don't lead into anything. They could be removed with nothing lost. The album is already quite short, so it's not like the listener needs this breather or anything. I like a good interlude, but it needs to complement the album, not be a speed bump. My big takeaway from Vended's first album is they definitely have room to grow. It's hard to view this band as just starting out, given the size of the gigs that they've already done, but they are just starting out. Remember back to your first band when you were in your late teens? It was likely also quite derivative of your influences at the time, and that's okay, we all need to start somewhere. I think Vended are in the unfortunate position where their formative music is so public, because everyone already knows about them. But give them time to hone their songwriting, and I think they've got the potential to come up with some very cool stuff. I think this self-titled will struggle to have a real impact on its own, given how the music isn't exactly fresh or exciting, and how it's almost inevitably going to be labelled as the album that sounds like Slipknot. But I think it's important not to forget that this is just the first step in the band's journey, and as it happens, we've all been able to see it. It most certainly struggles in the originality department, at times being close to derivative, but it's solid. I think anyone who's nostalgic for that early 2000s era of metal will find stuff to enjoy here. And here is the last time I will compare them to Slipknot. I know a lot of people that didn't like the last Slipknot album because of its musical direction. If that is the case, maybe check this out. It could be what you were looking for. Don't sneer at Vended before you've given the album a fair shot. It's nothing jaw-dropping, but it's good. The album itself, of course, is only part of the conversation around this band. Heck, I'd say it's less than half of the conversation. Most of the discussion has been around the family ties to Slipknot, and how this is a product of potential cynical nepotism. Let's be sensible for a moment. It would be naive to say that the relation that Griffin and Simon have to members of Slipknot have had no part in their shortcut to main stages of festivals and tours around the world. Obviously there will be connections, there will be a great story for marketing, there will be a pre-established fan base of people who love Slipknot and are curious to hear the next generation. It all gives them a boost right out of the gate. The actual quality of the music is irrelevant. This is all people are talking about. But is that necessarily fair? In my Scene Queen video, I spent a good amount of time taking pot shots at bad faith arguments on social media. A few people fed back to me saying that that wasn't a particularly useful exercise. It was like I was arguing with toilet wall graffiti. And you know what? You're right. I do really appreciate that feedback. I'll absolutely take that on board. Where many of the Scene Queen comments I was drawing from, let's be real, they weren't really worth acknowledging or wasting time on in the first place. It's the internet. Stupid comments like that are in abundance. It's not really worth wasting your time on. In the case of Vended, they've also been receiving a lot of very critical commentary because of their existence. With Vended, for the most part, as long as the comments are respectful, I could understand why someone would be frustrated by this. I understand particularly if you yourself are in a small band trying to make it, seeing a band seemingly have it handed to them is a sad reminder of the shallow side of this industry. My question to you though, if you were Griffin and Simon and you wanted to start your own band because you were passionate about making music, what are you supposed to do? Most metalheads dream of being in an awesome band. I'd be surprised if any metalhead of any age didn't at one point in their life attempt to, or even consider, forming their own project. These two have clearly had that dream too, and they've gone for it. The fact that their music sounds like their parents' band is possibly less to do with laziness or someone doing it for them, and more likely, that's just what they've grown up listening to. So many people assume their parents write their music for them, but you have no proof of that, and neither do I that they don't. And to their credit, from day one, it seems they did at least try to start from the ground up. In this Kerrang article from 2022, written by Luke Morton, the band describes their first show as being a 250 cap venue in their hometown of Des Moines, Iowa. A sold-out 250 capacity show is certainly not something most bands have for their first show, but it's something, and certainly not the immediate billing at Knotfest that people have claimed. Of course, after that the media took over, as word of the Sons of Slipknot band started to spread. Vended performed at Knotfest before their debut EP was even out. They then went on to play Bloodstock Festival in 2022 on the main stage, and did a 33-venue tour all over Europe and the UK, all before their first album had even come out. So yeah, the pedigree is certainly there, and has helped the band, no question. However, if you read interviews with the band, they don't try and hide this when questioned about it. In that same Kerrang interview, the band state, "Yeah, we got more help than other bands do, and I'm honest about that," begins Simon, visibly more riled. "I'm not going to say we didn't, because that's not fair to who our fathers are. They've helped us, but they have never, ever, ever written our music, never showed us how to play, never showed us how to perform on stage. They've never done any of that." Griffin then says, "I understand when people say, oh, they got all their musical talent from their fathers. I understand where people come from with that, because of genes or just the way the voice is built, but we didn't get our parents' musical talent. We found that on our own. It will be all but impossible for them to escape the shadow of their fathers. But hey, at least they're trying to stand on their own feet. I think it's fine to recognise that Vended had an easier ride than most other beginner bands did. However, I think the vitriol and criticism of that cynical way the music industry, and more importantly the music press, works, should not be aimed at the two guys who can't help their heritage. At the time of writing, this band have stayed independent and have self-released their debut album. I'm sure we can all speculate that it was Daddy's money that helped pay for the thing, but I would imagine many record labels would have sent some very attractive offers to get a band with not one, but two members who are related to Slipknot. What I think most people are forgetting about all of this, though, is that although the band had an in to get themselves off the ground, that's not a guarantee that this momentum will last. I completely get why people would view this whole thing as cynical. Yes, Vended have jumped ahead of many of the steps that the vast majority of struggling young bands have to take, but that advantage will only pay off if the music resonates with people. Vended have been lucky enough to play the pedigree card, but that card is now played, and you can't play it a second time. What will happen when their next album drops? The media can't exactly say, Vended are releasing their second album. They're the Sons of Slipknot, you know. Yes, we know. We know that when you told us the first time. The intrigue and hype won't work after this, so all they'll have to go on is the quality of their music, just like everyone else. Vended may have achieved a lot in their short tenure as a band, but let's not forget, it is only the beginning for them. Sure, media coverage has put them on the map, and plenty of people are at least aware of their existence. The onus is now on them to create music and perform shows that resonate with people so that they can continue. You can throw all the media backing behind a band that you want, but if people don't want to listen to it, it will never go anywhere. Their heritage helped them start their career, but only their work can sustain it. Oh sure, they could always get support from their successful parents, but this band do strike me as one who want to make music that they love, and hope that fans can love it along with them, and you can't buy that kind of passion. I, for one, am very interested to see what Vended do next.